Well, good evening, listeners and viewers of This Week in Interview and TDN Radio. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Interview. I know there are a bunch of you who went to Dominica for the festival, and so you must be recovering, or are you fully recovered? Also, actual independence celebration in Dominica uh, took place. I guess it's still going on, sort of, because the day that is celebrated is the 3rd of November. Although once the World Korean Music Festival is done, it's sort of anticlimactic. But anyhow, I hope that you have had your fill of festivity. I hope you have renewed your patriotism and your commitment to Dominica, because it's a time to stare soberly at our citizenship or member of the Dominican community, and not just citizens, but we have many friends scattered all around the world who have adopted Dominica as either their home or their second home. So welcome, and again a happy independence celebration to the folks of Dominica. Special good evening to you on the Nature Isle, Dominica. If you're listening to us from there, RVR Jams radio carries This Week in Interview live on DigiPlay channel 59. Also in the Toronto market, online radio SBE in the Toronto market. I think it's a mostly they cater to the Haitian population in Toronto. So Sac Passe, I hope you guys are having a great evening as well. I know you, of course, the listeners who come back every Wednesday, who have been coming back year after year. I appreciate you, and I really am honored that you make this week in interview part of your weekly schedule. There are many people who are hearing this program for the first time this week. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you too can become a regular listener to the program. So, what we have on tap for you tonight. So, Dominica, as you know, celebrated its 47th year of independence from colonial rule. That happened in 1978. You know, the 70s, there was a fervor for sovereignty, self-determination, mixed in with the Black Power movement, a whole Black awareness and Africanism, Pan-Africanism with Marcus Garvey, Winnie Mandela, Nelson Mandela, all those folks, and on the campuses in North America and in Europe. The young people at the time were really becoming aware and demanding a better place in society, and that filtered into the Caribbean. And so a number of Caribbean countries were pushing to become independent, to be self-determined from the colonial masters, Britain in the case of Dominica. And so Dominica attained its independence in 1978. I was a young boy. I was my first year in grammar school. I had moved from the country, from Castlebrus on the east coast of Dominica to Roseau to go to grammar school. And I happened to be there standing in the Windsor Park at the time when the flag was hoisted and we had the address from the Prime Minister Patrick John. And I remember as a young boy, even if at that age you don't quite remember everything. I mean, I was 11 at the time, 1978. I was 11 years old, but the sense of pride was just and optimism was just palpable, and everybody was so enthusiastic about it. Now that I'm older, I'm reading things that say that not everybody was as excited about it, of course, but in general the community looked forward to it. And so 47 years is almost 50, and so I've been wondering about when in 78 we decided to take charge of our destiny as a nation, what were our aspirations at that time? There was a lot of talk about we were small islands, limited resources. We probably couldn't make it on our own. We'll have to depend on the good graces of all the nations and such, that sort of thing. But I always wondered that if we decided we wanted to go it independent, we must have had a plan. We must have had, the idea that we could make it on our own. Otherwise, why would we go independent? Why would your child leave your house voluntarily and fight you to leave your house if he or she didn't have an idea or an aspiration that they could make a life of their own? And so tonight I have a very, very special guest. My guest tonight is Mr. Oliver Seraphin. Mr. Seraphin was a member of that original cabinet, the first cabinet on Dominica uh, as an independent nation. He was a member of the cabinet. So he's the perfect person, I think, to talk to us about that. What was his psyche? What was our perspective? Not only that, he also was the prime minister of Dominica there for a while, and he's been a public figure. Uh, Sort of like an example. Uh, Subsequently he became an entrepreneur, a businessman, a very upstanding citizen that blazed the trail, and a young man like me could look up to say, okay, this is somebody that looks like us, that is doing well and doing good, and therefore we could take example of him on him as to what we too could become. And so I decided that I was going to invite uh, OJ, as we affectionately call him in Dominica, OJ Seraphin, Mr. Oliver Seraphin, to come on the program, and I was so thrilled when he agreed. I'm really, you know, starstruck, if you want to say, because the first time I had a prime minister, a former prime. No, I think I had Edison James on before, but still, it's still an honor to have somebody of that caliber agree to come on the program. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I want to bring him up and to give him a very, very warm welcome to the program. Mr. Seraphin, welcome to this weekend interview. It's an honor to have you as my guest tonight.
It is, in fact, a pleasure to have heard from you and to be introduced to your radio station, your program. I wasn't aware of it before. I lived in a bubble, as they would say. I do come to New York every now and again, but I feel to have been able to have had an opportunity to be introduced to your station. And so tonight I'm very pleased to be with you. As you mentioned, and I think I've said so in other radio interviews, that I'm blessed by the Holy Spirit that I am the last surviving member of the cabinet of Patrick John that brought Dominica to independence. And like you, I was part of the persons who were fortunate, more fortunate than you were, maybe, in the sense that I was older and I was on the stage, really, as a
Mm,
minister of government
wow.
when the flag was hoisted. And as I've said in other publications and in other opportunities when I speak to the public on some forum or the other, um, I happen to be the president of the Dominica Labour Party at a very young age. In fact, I was treasurer of the Dominica Labour Party when I was 25 years old. And I became president at an early age as well. Um, Consequent upon that, when we decided as a party, because there is a process as we understood it in those days, that the party executive would give a vision to the cabinet members, who in turn would go to parliament with that vision and pass on whatever it is that's agreed upon. And so, in the case of independence, when the executive of the party, following on the elections of 1975, had made a public declaration that we were going to look for independence for Dominica, Patrick John then had the Salisbury Declaration. In Salisbury, a document which spelled out in very clear terms our reason for seeking independence,
seeking independence, and that was in 1975
76.
and 76. So
And
there was a
75 was
stop
the election.
of the
75 was
election.
the elections, and
Hmm.
76 was the when Patrick had this very momentous statement that
Right.
stated basically that we're going to look for independence. And I was blessed to have been chosen by Patrick together with the Attorney General and the Minister of Finance, Vic Rivera. The Attorney General was Lee Austin. I think I said so in another publication. And we went to England to
So you were
inform them.
part of the party that went
I
to
was
England.
part of the party who went to England the first party. There's a second party that went in for formalization and so on,
Hmm.
which included quite a number of other persons. But in this first instance, when we came to declare our intent for independence, I happened to be one of them.
Wow.
All three of the other gentlemen, by the way, are now deceased. Patrick is gone, Lee Austin died, and so did Vic Rivera.
Victory.
And but when we came back to Dominica, there was a very strong opposition to independence for all kinds of reasons. I wouldn't go into them right now to take too long. But whatever the reasons were, a mob gathered outside the Low Black Bridge, and we were harassed and went through a very physical interaction, negative interaction with the people who had made that big presence. So
So
that's
you saying that when it was known that there was a delegation from the government who went to England to declare your intent to seek independence. When you came back to Dominica, there was a negative reaction from some people.
well, so much of a reaction that in fact they knocked the vehicle and pushed it around as best as they can.
They mobbed the vehicle.
Yeah, they mopped the vehicle
Oh,
and
wow.
they slammed on the vehicle, and it was a very violent experience. Actually, we were when we had arrived at Melville Hall Airport. The wife of Mr. John had informed him by phone that we should be careful because she understand that there was a mob gathering outside the bridge to
In,
welcome us in a
into
negative way
Roseau. Hmm.
into Roseau. And I like to find solutions to situations. And I suggested to Patrick and Lee Austin. Vic Revere decided that he'd stay back. He's from Maho. He stayed back in Maho. And the three of us were on the vehicle. And I said, but let's face, let's do it this way. Let's go up um, by the hospital and go through the back road and then go across through the botanical gardens and up to Montrose, where we all stayed. All
Hmm.
three of us were living at Montrose. But
Because
Patrick, in his very,
that's where government house is.
that's correct. But
Okay.
houses were, not only
Oh,
one.
there were
There was
houses
Patrick,
there.
yeah, there, because I lived there as well, and Lee Austin lived there close by.
Oh,
And
wow.
Patrick also had a house. So these are government houses that were there. Some
Government
of them
houses.
have been broken by the hurricanes.
Hmm.
I don't know what is happening about the upkeep and rebuilding and reconstruction, but that's
Wow.
where Libna was living before, and that's where Patrick John was living before. And as a Minister of Agriculture, I lived there as well.
Okay.
And so Patrick elected to go direct. He says, listen, no, I'm the leader of this country, and I'm not going to run away from the people.
Hmm.
And we're going to drive through to the bridge, and what we meet, we'll face it.
You'll deal with it.
Because he has a bold, strong personality, really, this gentleman. And so we decided, okay, let's go through, and then we were faced with that consequence. I'm saying so just to say that it was not an easy, how do I put it, process
Hmm.
for people on Dominica to accept
So
Patrick
what
John as
were
prime minister.
what were some of the fears or the objections that people were raising about the concept of independence?
Yeah, well, in my mature age now, I tend to like to take a spiritual aspect and to give some credit to people and hoping that their better mindset might have been there. But I have to admit that there were lots of persons who expressed that they thought that Patrick John was not deserving because of his culture, because of his social standing and whatever, to be a prime minister. That's unfortunate, but I am saying so with a lot of reluctance But the reality stares me in the face. That's precisely what was said at the time by many people.
So it wasn't that people were expressing concern that the country may not be able to have the resources to handle its
I
affairs
don't think that wasn't
independent.
a very strong point, Although there were some publications, one of which was called "Think It Over."
Hmm.
And in that document, I don't have a copy of it. I had one. Hurricane David took it away, but in that document, they were trying to express certain desires to hold on to our present status as an associated state, and but we thought, and I believe, having been in the politics myself, that the intention really was to slow down the process of independence, and the expectation that there would have been another opportunity for the incoming opposition to become government, and then they would bring us to independence, as opposed to Patrick John.
As opposed to Patrick John. Okay, so let's backtrack into a little bit of a historical context. Um, for those of us, because I don't remember EO Leblanc as premier. In my memory, I know I heard the name as a young boy. So EO Leblanc was premier until 1975, and then he passed on the reins
70,
to
actually, he was until 74, I think it was.
74, and then he passed on the reins to Patrick John, and Patrick John took the country into elections in 75
Yeah.
as premier.
But it wasn't just a tame transition of LeBlanc to Patrick.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm new to your forum here, but I have said it before and I'll say it again. And I believe one of your very popular presenters on your program also expressed a similar view when we spoke on another forum as it pertains to the difficulties that Libla was faced with,
Hmm.
which began from 1968 or thereabout, a few years after becoming the leader of the country. And during that time, Libla was faced with having to fight a lot of opposition from the Freedom Fighters, the group was called, which emerged into the Freedom Party later on.
Okay.
And in 1971, the 16th of December, 1971, there was almost a similar situation as the 29th of May of 79, when the House of Assembly was attacked, the mob came in, they took the mace and so on. And
In
someone
71, if
in
you live as
16th
premier.
of December 71 with Louis Blanche
71.
Premier.
Okay. Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm.
That followed by a number of other incidents where someone called Daniel Kodera was working at the DBS radio station, and he was, uh, from the perspective of the government, um, he was saying what is not really acceptable to the government of the day, that someone working for them would be hostile to them as an employee of the radio station. And
Hmm.
the intention was to move him to the grammar school as a teacher. And that created a lot of mayhem. And this gentleman, Charles Sovereign and Christopher Maxime, and all the senior civil servants were arrested. And as a consequence of that, um, there was a lot of militancy and responses from the civil service on a strike and all of that. And during all of that difficulty that Leblanc went through, he thought that this is not necessary, that he should bring his family through that. He was very uncomfortable about the manner in which he was being treated. And
Hmm.
he decided that he would leave the leadership of the country and pass it on to someone else.
Okay.
Patrick John became the leader of the Dominican Labour Party. And as a result of that, he took over and was faced with similar treatment, because from the time he came in, um, there were other situations with long strikes, 47-day strike, and other such situations, motivated and, in fact, created by the civil service as a primary um, uh, group of persons who fought against the government for reasons of salary increases of that kind of
salary
benefit
negotiations
negotiations
between the civil
with the
service
service and the
and government.
government.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
In
go ahead.
addition to that, the Waterfront and Allied Workers Union, which was actually a union formed for the persons who are the stevedores and the people who work on the
Hmm.
waterfront. Patrick John was a founder member of that. And one of his persons that came alongside with him to build that union was Louis Benoit. And
Hmm.
Louis Benoit, also turned against Patrick John and became a vice president of the Freedom Party. And so the political movement in those days was very hostile towards the Patrick John government.
Government. Okay. No, so the 70s there was this political and civil turmoil, and so
Mhm.
in 74, ahead of the election that was due in 75, Libla handed the reins to Patrick John. Patrick John took the country into elections. He won. That's in 75. And then the delegation that you spoke about that went to England, well, that was in 70. What year was
So
that?
about 77 there, about
77.
77. Mhm.
77. And so you guys, you all went in and declared the intention of the government to seek independence, and then you came back, you faced some opposition, but eventually we became independent on the 3rd of November 1978. uh,
Correct.
right, and soon after that, I guess not soon after, because from what you're saying, all of that civil and political volatility continued and resulted in the collapse of the Patrick John administration in, it was at late 78.
The collapse of the 29th of May 79.
29th of May 1979. Yes, okay.
79.
79. Okay. Now this is where it becomes interesting that an interim government was formed, and you, Mr. Oliver J. Seraphin, was picked, was chosen to be the leader of that interim government that would see the country um, sort of settle down, if so to speak, um, to take us into a more peaceful um, transition. So how when you answer that question, also I want you to tell me a little bit about your background that resulted in you being in politics. Okay. But the question I'm asking you is that how comes you, probably one of the youngest persons there? I know you said you were the president of the Liberal Party and all that, but how it came to be that you were the one that was chosen to lead the country through that rough time and sort of settle it down sufficiently to where we could go into an election in 1980. Okay, I think that would have been the plan, right? Next um, election would be due in 1980. This was 79. An interim government was formed and you were selected. Talk to us about that process.
This is really one of the most complex construct of understanding the reality of where we were on the 29th, following the 29th of May 79. Um, a little backdrop on that was that the Patrick John arriving to become the leader of the Labour Party was to a large extent one that was orchestrated by a few of us who were able to get a majority of support of the party members to give Patrick John support when the call was made for a convention to determine who would be the leader of the party. And there was a gentleman, Mr. Etienne, and there was Ronald Armour, who contested the leadership. And I happened to be at the forefront, having been at that time in the hierarchy of the party's executive. And I was able to find the numbers of persons who could qualify to become members of the party to vote. And Patrick John became the leader by the expressive view of the members of the party. So Patrick and myself then had a very close relationship. Um, so on a 29th of May, when this matter came up for the people of Dominica to have come down to Roseau to have a demonstration against the government, throwing stones at the ministry and attacking members of the House of Assembly and going to supporters' homes and ransacking their homes and business places and so on, and really putting the fear of God in them. There was another matter that was happening in the cabinet outside of this structure of terrorism and violence and all of that, where a gentleman, Leo Austin, who was then the Attorney General, had involved in Dominica's government with the uh, South Africa, where in South Africa the apartheid movement was on, and the black people, of course, were being treated as second-class citizens and what have you. And the world at large, particularly the more progressive countries of the world, had decided to boycott South Africa. But then a letter arrived in my possession, which demonstrated that somebody called Coed Z, who was a minister in the cabinet of the government of South Africa, that the government of Dominica, through Lee Austin, had embarked upon a cooperative agreement for some oil refineries and other things, which was completely contrary to the principles that the party stood for. Then there was another matter that came up about offshore bank, Federal Bank of Dominica, I think it was called. It had its offices at 64 King George V Street in Roseau, Dominica, and also one in London. And the vice president of that federal bank happened to have been Leo Austin, again, the foreign minister of foreign affairs. That too was, for me, unacceptable, and I brought it to the attention of the cabinet. And then in addition to that, I had represented Dominica at an ACP EEC conference, that is African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, to determine the price structure on sugar and on bananas. And lo and behold, a gentleman turns up at that conference, and the people like Barrow and Manley of Jamaica and so on, and I believe it was Chambers of Trinidad, if I'm not mistaken. They called me to a private meeting, these senior ministers, prime ministers, and said that this Caucasian person who came from Europe as an ambassador to Dominica was unacceptable to them, and because they were going to negotiate prices as to how to get the best deal out of the European Economic Community for the ACP countries. And they have somebody from that same group coming in to see how we are negotiating and what are our positions. They told me that I couldn't sit in at the meeting of the ACP group. Subsequent to that, I also had an experience like that in Trinidad. At the Hilton Hotel in Trinidad, I was called aside for a second round of meetings, where the gentleman again appeared, only to find out that this man was never known to the cabinet. So it is against this background and many other such situations that I brought the attention of those things to the Prime Minister. And he was not a person who was very hostile, as it were, to his those that he had confidence in. And I had to inform him that based upon that and some other matters which will take too long to explain,
Mm-hmm.
I told him that I was unable to continue to serve as a minister of government due to the fact that he was not prepared to release Austin. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I have a document here which will be too long to read, which says there very clearly that I said to him in my resignation letter that in view of the fact that he was not prepared to release Austin, who was just a civil servant, was not a member of the executive party, and was creating a lot of bad imagery of our government, that I couldn't serve any longer because of the fact that he wasn't releasing Austin. So I resigned on I believe it was on the 1st of June, and the incidents took place on the 29th of May of
Right.
1970.
Hmm.
So it didn't take me long. I wasn't subjected to all those negative situations that the other ministers went through. I didn't resign because of fear or of anything. In fact, my resignation had nothing to do with what was going on the outside. It was separate from the action taken by the persons who were the combatants on the 29th of May. However, a very interesting situation occurred where I happened to have been on my way to my wife's family place in Atkinson, and I stopped at Venus, and I got a call that the Committee for National Salvation had met. Now, they were meeting regularly since the overthrow because, or the attempt at the overthrow, because at that time, Fred de Gazon, and I'm speaking here because I believe many of your listeners may not have heard that story, or may not have heard that historical background to what transpired, and that is Fred de Gazon, who was the then president of Dominica, left in the dark of night from the airport and went to England, and so Dominica was without a president. Shortly after, Patrick John had attempted to get Sir Louis Coulson to become the president. I believe he had accepted this. Again, a mob went to his place, turned over his vehicle. I believe it was caught on fire, and there were threats to his family, and he withdrew his acceptance of being the governor, the president. So there we are, we're in a country that was in a limbo. And so the members of the Committee for National Salvation were representatives, leadership of all organizations of the country, I mean, bar none. And they included, and I wish to read them for you because it's important that we know who
Okay.
we are talking about. They
Right after you
included,
read that, I have to take a commercial break, but let's go through the list so you don't break the story too
I'll
much.
just finish with this and then you'll take your commercial break if
Yeah.
you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. But there was persons that we know today. Sheridan Gregoire, of Dominica Employers Federation. Pamela Liebert, she was one of the owners of the Batters shoe store in those days. Bernie Didier, the Social League. A.F. Anthony Frederick Joseph, the Dominica Amalgamated Workers Union. Louis Benoit, Waterfront and Island Workers Union. Pierre Charles, he represented the Youth Council. Percival Marie represented the CSA. Norris Charles was representing the Dominica Amalgamated Workers Union. Julius Sampson representing the Dominica Association of Industry and Commerce. Bernard Nicholas was the representative of the Dominica Trade Union. The Church Council was present too, Father Heusman. Eugenia Charles of the Freedom Party. Milton Aylwa of the National Workers Union. Mike Douglas of DLM. Brian Allen, the Freedom Party. Charles Savrin, the CSA. Curtis Augustus, the Waterfront Workers Union. Afi Martin and Alvin Aman Trading, the Farmers Union. Julius Timothy of the Dominica Association of Industry and Commerce. Rollins J. Mott, the National Workers Union. And Bernard Wiltshire, the BEMA. So what you have there are persons who, over the last 3 or so or 4 decades, have been consistent in the leadership of Dominica in its empirical terms, where they represent organizations and so on. So within that scope of all of these people, not one of them were able to become prime minister for the simple reason that you would need to have 11 persons who are elected in the parliament to give support to an individual in order to meet the basic criteria, even if it was a bit obscure aspect of our constitutional merit because of how it was being done. But the fact of the matter was that you needed to have 11 elected members supporting someone who's also elected to become the Prime Minister of Dominica. Not one of them met that. And it is at this point that I came in, and that is something historians may not have given it much thought to. And I dare say because they will eventually arrive at that conclusion I'm arriving at, that had it not been my position to become another political party called the Democratic Labour Party and cause many of the persons who were elected members supporting the Patrick John government like I did, but because they supported some of the things I represented by way of the principles that I stood for, they decided to join the Democratic Labour Party, and we passed a resolution, and together with some members of the Freedom Party and the independents that were in the parliament, we were able to get the majority of 11 to form a government, and I became Prime Minister legitimately.
Which constituency did you represent?
The Roseau, it was called the Canefield constituency and the Roseau Valley.
Okay, so Roseau North?
Roseau, actually the Canefield constituency and the Roseau Valley, which includes Mount Prosper, Waterhaven, Trafalgar, Loudoun, and Cochrane.
So it's afterwards the Roseau North and so came in. Canefield was
That's right. They came in after that election of 75. It was there for the
because you could go from Canefield to
Cochrane.
Cochrane, right, and then go across that region.
That's correct.
You're in the Roseau Valley. Okay, I see that, how that happened. Okay, all right. So we're gonna take a break. Folks, if you joined us a little late and you, for whatever reason, don't know the gentleman that's on the screen, my guest tonight is Mr. Oliver J. Seraphin, the former Prime Minister of Dominica. And he's on the program tonight because for several reasons. One, as I said, he's a former Prime Minister. He was part of the government that led Dominica into independence. He's a sole survivor of that cabinet. And of course, just someone who has been in leadership position in Dominica from way back then and still is. And so by all means, he is the most qualified and suitable person to be my guest tonight on this weekend interview. Before we take the break, I want to acknowledge a number of you who are on the line. Didi Easter, Alvin Thomas, Sharon, Glenda Lavidou, Burton. Those of you who have commented and participating, thank you so much for all the participation and the engagement. A lot of comments are coming and flowing through. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I will continue my conversation with Mr. O.J. Seraphin. I'm going to talk to him about the whole psyche of the country, the aspirations of a country, a small island coming out of a period of the majority of its population, descendants of enslaved people, coming out of colonization, then a semblance, some measure of self-determination, all the way to independence. At that time, at that point in 1978, what were the aspirations? What was the path forward that we saw, that would take us to a point where we could successfully solve our problems and feed our people and protect our people and provide a life for our people as an independent nation. So stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Presented by Presented by Presented by
People say I've got a great smile. Well, I have to say, this is all thanks to the professional team at Beacon Dental Group right here in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I've got world-class dental care. Beacon Dental Group has expert and caring staff dedicated to providing the most advanced and satisfactory treatment in all aspects of oral health. Their services are designed to meet your needs and give you a perfect smile, too. General checkups, cosmetic surgery, Gemini laser service, and advanced procedures, all in a state-of-the-art facility. Call or visit Beacon Dental Group today, 1026 Blue Hill Avenue, Dorchester, Massachusetts, or call 617-282-2146 for a smile that lights the world.
Running a radio station shouldn't be chaos. It should be simple, smart, and professional. With Joan Premium, your entire week schedule is beautifully organized and easy to manage. Real-time accuracy keeps your listeners in sync with every show. Your visitors and audience sees the right schedule every time, wherever they are. They can even choose different time zones. From analytics to social media and native app integration, Joan Premium is the professional tool your station deserves. You're never alone. We provide priority support for active license users. We're building a community. Connect with broadcasters worldwide through our Joan Community Hubs. Choose your plan, annual flexibility, or lifetime freedom. Get Joan Premium today. www.gndenterprisesinc.com or call 877-698-9894 for more information.
Looking to promote your business, engage current customers, and reach new people? Well, look no further. From the basic presentation to a fully fledged advertisement, use your video ads to attract customers. At Man's Audiovisual Productions, we do just that. We produce videos for business and event promotions, product demo videos, animated explainer videos, fundraiser ads, and much, much more. Engage your clients and sell online. We customize the video to match your brand design. Guaranteed to play flawless on all devices, including smart TVs. Contact us at telephone number 203-690-4342 or 767-245-6238. Visit our website, mansaudiovisual.com, or email us at derekvideo@gmail.com.
All right, so we're back. Thanks for staying with us through the break, and many thanks to our sponsors, Beacon Dental Health, Joan Premium. If you have a radio station, helps you to manage your on-air programming. Check it out. There's a free version if you like it. There's even a paid version that will do even more for you. Man's Audiovisual, they do the graphics for this week in interview, the flyers and stuff. You contact them from your smallest job, a business card, a flyer, to your greatest job to film your wedding or conference and post-production work. They are your professionals. So what we're doing tonight on this week in interview is taking you back. It's taking you back to 1978, when, and even before that, the build-up. We've set the stage. I think a solid stage that uh, clearly uh, outlines the circumstances that existed in Dominica leading up to 1978, the internal politics, the interaction between the government and the union. We understand about the, one member of parliament going out on his own and doing stuff that brought the government into bad light, and probably the lack of decisiveness on the part of the leader, Patrick John, to nip that in its bud um, before it became a problem. And just the whole international environment around folks of African descent being able to determine their own future. Those are the in broad terms, the environment that led us into our independence in 1978. And one of the important reasons why we're doing this is so that we can educate our people about it, because if you don't know what happened in the past, you are at risk of repeating the same error, and sometimes you're not as lucky the second time around, because we've heard stories about in the next time around that Labour Party came into power under Prime Minister Rosie Douglas, we heard of one rogue person going off to meetings on their own and so on, and that seemed to have been the genesis of the country going off track and into a position where we are right now, which we're not necessarily. If we were sitting in 1978, as a student, if I was sent on an assignment to sit in cabinet with my guest, Mr. Oliver Seraphin, and the rest of the cabinet, and they were discussing the aspirations and the expectations of the country as we approach independence, I am not sure that where the country exists now, the circumstances that exist in the country right now, the quality of life of the people right now, the hopes of the people right now, I am not sure that that would have been the picture that they would have painted. I'm not sure that where Dominica is now, 47 years after independence, is. I don't know how. I don't think it closely matches what was in the minds of those leaders who took us into independence. But Mr. Seraphin is right here, so I don't have to keep guessing. I'm going to ask him the question. Can we talk about OJ? Can you talk to us a bit about the whole idea of self-determination, self-governance? Uh, I'm sure that the government at the time was confident that as a people we had the wherewithal to paddle our own canoe, so to speak, but also to sell the idea to the population. I'm sure there was a picture that was painted of a future Dominica that was prosperous and a happy place to be. So tell us about that, and we can delve into how closely that vision matches where we are now. So what would those visions?
A very interesting question, a very, very intriguing question, because you asked me how did I fit in? Earlier question,
Mm.
how did I fit in? How this young person, younger than the rest, um,
You were in your 30s at the time, no?
that's correct, very, very early 30s.
Mm.
And, how would this person have become the one chosen? I tried to explain to you that it was really not for the joy of it that the opposition within the Committee for National Salvation wanted to have got a Labourite, somebody from the Labour Party, to again become the Prime Minister of Dominica. The intention, and of course, again, I'm trying to say this thing in a balanced way, but clarity of knowledge and the experience I went through was obvious that the intention then was I would be malleable, manageable, and being subject to influence
Hmm.
of those other parties that formed that Committee for National Salvation, so that when I would emerge as the Prime Minister, um, I would be a puppet, so to speak, just paving the way to clear the desks for the incoming new government. I think that was the plan. And I would like to just, for the record, establish what a number of the historians have been unable to unearth, because I guess the lack of inside information and probably research in that particular area may have forbid them from arriving at a conclusion which I'm about to express. And that is, very unfortunately for Dominica, 3 months after the 29th of May, was the 29th of August, came the hurricane.
Hmm.
And during that period, the disastrous aspect of the hurricane was one that was consequent upon even members of the government and the active persons that were involved with the period leading to the downfall of Patrick. Everybody was minding their business, as it were. And so here I was with very few support. I think Afi Martin being one of the few that I can recall, who came forth to assist me at the police headquarters to get things back in order. I had persons like George Odlum from St. Lucia who turned up, and other persons who turned up to assist in various ways. Even Maurice Bishop came down and lent his support with whatever way he could. And so, as a consequence of that, when I looked for the Committee for National Salvation, that was supposed to have been the organization that was like, if you wish, a sounding board for development programs and so on leading to a next election. They had disappeared to the largest extent. And so I remember saying publicly, it's written on the records with both on print and Chronicle and other places like the Hansard, where I said that the CNS, the Committee for National Salvation, was blown away by the winds of David. And shortly after that, ministers of government who came from the committee's recommendation from the Freedom Party and elsewhere were removed from my government, and they were replaced with other persons that I selected. And you'd be surprised to know that one of them was Papi, Leonard Baptist, became a senator.
I remember that. I'm from Castle Bruce. I know Papi.
Oh, you're from Castle Bruce. I forgot that back.
Yeah.
And then, okay. And so I made him a senator, and I made the chief at the time, Hillary Frederick, become a senator, and Louis Robinson became a senator, and so on. And so a new government was formed. And I remember going to Parliament and saying that we are hydra-headed. When you cut off one head of the Labour Party, another one grows. So what transpired then was that I had removed myself from all the garments that were placed on my shoulders by the Committee for National Salvation. I disrobed myself from them and went on my own arrangement to lead the country up to the elections to come. And so that's one thing that one may not have understood, that the Labour Party that was removed was replaced by the fact that the Democratic Labour Party that I led was able now to reform and restructure and go back and continue the business of running the country. But what I would like to say too was that if one asks me, as I am aging, I'm not here forever, what would be my legacy? I would say my legacy was that I made a country that was torn through a revolution for which there was no answer by the best of the minds that I just mentioned earlier, to restructure our democracy and our constitutional situation. That I stepped in with the Democratic Labour Party and got members of the Patrick John government to support me, together with those who were independent and other members of the Freedom Party, to form a government, and that government was able to call on elections within that 5-year period. But I must also add something here, that the night prior to and the night of the elections, I was a guest at the Hummingbird Inn in Canefield, where I was using there as my place of repose for listening on to the election results. And I was met with 4 members of the Defense Force, and who came in and suggested that I should not relinquish authority because, as far as they're concerned, the country has not yet been recovered from the hurricane, and I should remain in government, and they would support me remaining under martial law to run the country. And I said to them, "He who kills by the sword dies by the sword, and I'm not prepared to put myself and my family within just the protection of a defense force." All of those members who came to see me that night have passed away. One was hung, and one was shot in the streets of Roseau after having tried to overcome the police station. So that when they said that we could run the place by that kind of martial law, it was not a joke, because they did try it some years later with the Eugene Charles government. So I'm saying that I gave back to my country their democracy. I give back to my country their constitutional rights. So even if that is not recognized by the majority of persons, in or out of government, I know when I sleep on my bed And even probably my last little smile before I pass away, I'll know I did what I had to do to protect my country's
So
integrity.
right, and so I mean that is something that should not be glossed over. Because a different personality could have gone taken the country a different way. So one of the successes I guess we can say in terms of as a nation was that we were able to continue our our tread along the road of democracy and rule by majority vote. Uh, do you think that the hurricane and so on is what took us off track from the vision that the government had at the time in November 1978? What took us off our vision, or what was the vision?
Well, it took us off the vision for the reason being that we first of all, you have to bear in mind that we had this November 3rd, 1978 was independence.
Right.
And whether you like Patrick John or not, he was a hugely popular person on the 3rd of November 78.
Hmm.
But just 5, 6 months later came the overthrow, so to speak.
Hmm.
Now, when I resigned from government, Patrick John had, I believe, 16 or 17 seats, in parliament. And I thought that my absence is just, well, you just want to demonstrate your integrity and you do not want to accept that, certain situations that were, which you didn't agree with, that you're not prepared to continue to serve. And, that's how it should be. If your leader is doing something and you're not in favor of it, you only have one choice, but it's to resign,
Right.
and which is what I did. And so for those who call me crook and all kinds of names and so on, if you don't stand by what you believe in, I grew up, my father was a disciplinarian, a man of integrity. And he taught me the way that when you do not want something, you don't have to stick to it and lose your integrity. And so I stepped out of there because I didn't want to accept that I will be subjected to a situation that my inner being would not accept.
Hmm.
And so I'm saying this to say this, that at the end of the day, what would have been the story of Dominica had Patrick John remained could have been a better story than what transpired following the coup of 29th of May, because there were some great ideas. And one must not limit Patrick's contribution in any way. After all, there was the Social Security, there was the aid bank, there was the National Bank, there was the housing projects that would, in fact, I was the Minister of Housing for Baffin State and for Canefield and so forth. And there were quite a number of the cooperative movement had begun showing its way, where young people in Yard and different parts of Dominica were being formed. And there was the intention that young people, if they independently could not qualify to meet the resources necessary for doing a project, that they'd form cooperatives. The Candle Cooperative was there. There were all kinds of cooperatives that were established in Dominica throughout the country. And so there was some indication that we were going somewhere, But for Lee Austin, I
Hmm.
would have been happy to remain part of that team. But I left. But the dream really, and that is what must be understood. I've heard one or two people, even in recent times, like yesterday and the day before, I've heard certain persons who tried to, so to speak, disinherit the fact that there was, in fact, a cultural and social revolution in Dominica. You come from Castle Bruce,
Hmm.
and if I dare say so, you might be the first one that came out with a degree from a university, from your family tree, from your parents and so on. Your parents may have been farmers and or whatever, they're part of the peasantry. And so what Libla had achieved, really, and that is what must be understood and chronicled and accepted, there's no doubt about it, that there was a dramatic historical change in Dominica's social order, where those who in the earlier days became doctors or lawyers and so on came from the privileged few, mostly from the city of Roseau, and with surname values that made the fact that they could enter in certain places like the banks and be employed. and those who come from Malawi were not treated with respect and dignity. But Libla changed that, and Patrick continued this. So, I mean, we have to give credit where credit is due, you know? And so this is when you ask, what is the dream of independence? What was the aspirations? Libla started it off very well. And I remember Libla turning around and saying to those of us that he wanted to wear shed jacks as opposed to suits. And I was the one who represented Dominica to be on the yacht Britannia with the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. And everybody was dressed splendidly with their long coats and whatever. Prime Minister of Antigua and St. Lucia and everybody else was resplendent in and very, what I'd say, immaculate Western or, you know, empirically correct dress. And I had a Nero outfit, just a shed jack, button to the top, looking elegant. And Prince Philip came to me and said, why am I dressed differently when we came from the Caribbean? I said, because my leader at the time, prior to Patrick John, had informed us that it is a good idea to dress according to the climate that we're in. And he found that the dress that I had was very suitable for the climate of the Caribbean. I'm saying so to say this, that Libla was also the one who started off with the idea of the Beach Ordinance Act, where every beach of Dominica, wherever they have a five-star hotel on it or not, that beach belongs to a Dominican. You can walk on that beach. There's also the idea that lands should be held for the Dominican people, and that all lands, unless you have a specific plan approved by the government of Dominica to employ Dominicans, that you can't purchase more than 1 acre of land. If you're an outsider, you could have it for
citizens, right?
But you cannot come in and just buy portions of land like happened in Soufriere and up in this area where all this mayhem took place. So it was, these are the areas where, as a young man, my father brought me to political meetings, etc., etc. And I became involved in the politics. In fact, I became a godfather of Isilu Black, daughter. I became a godfather of N.A.N. Ducres, a son of N.A.N. Ducres. And so I was very much, although young, I was very much involved in the whole fabric of the Labour Party from the perspectives of those things which I just mentioned. The whole idea of changing the social order of the country. And of course, land reform, therefore, became my continuous area of interest in the politics of Dominica. So even before being Prime Minister, there were lands coming all the way from Soufriere, which is the Soufriere the Elros and Company estate, that land where, what's his name? The hotel is located. Jungle Bay. All those lands going back there belong to Elros and Company. And they were taken over, purchased at agreeable terms from Elros and Company. Lands in Point Michel, lands in Wharton Waven and Mount Prosper. In fact, there was a court case. I was the one who acquired the lands in Mount Prosper and Wharton Waven, in the principle that, you know, we needed to give it back to the villagers from the Rogue family. And when Eugenia came in, she tried to give it back to them. It went to court. And I remember Babs Dyer was the one who represented the clients, or one of the clients who were a cousin of mine, and Ronan David was representing the government. And they were trying to say that what was acquired was wrongly acquired, and the case was won for the people. And today you have the different sulfur spring places owned by local people from that very land. So there was that land transformation, you know. And the same could be said of lands that were in Blue Gourmet and the various lands in Tefem and different places that were acquired by, that were owned by government, was distributed. So land distribution, and farmers therefore got lands in places like Kayambuk in Maragat, which I gave lands to, lands in Wesley and in Maragat that was given to farmers. And so as a result of that, the whole land ownership, whereas when we came into government, 6% of the country's population owned 80% or thereabout of the land.
Wow.
So there was a need for land transformation, ownership. And Castle Bruce Estate became one of them. In fact, during my term of office, the Carib territory, the Kalinago territory, there was AC Shillingford's heirs that were claiming lands up in Concord. And that land was reverted back to the Carib people. And the same could be said in Castle Bruce at the end of when you go past Siniku. That land there's a portion of land that was being claimed by Castle Bruce Estate was returned back to the people of the Kalinago
Wakama,
territory.
is that the one?
Yes. So I am saying all of that to say that the Labour Party, therefore, at that time, had a reason for justifying the claim that let the poor man walk tall, let the little man walk tall, because the intention was to ensure that we gave an opportunity for the less fortunate. Let me just say this as well. When it comes to education, you're looking at the situation where people from the Carib territory, the Kalinago territory, very few, if any, there are one or two or three who went to the convent high schools, girls from the Kalinago territory directly, and they were the ones who were persons who adopted by either Chandolfrey or some other more affluent Dominican, that these people ended up Agar and so on, and they ended up there. And in the case of grammar school, there's only one Carib that I knew, or maybe two, a fellow called Tyson, and a guy called Corrett, Luke Corrett, who was a table tennis champion. These were the only people who made it to these high schools. But then again, when the Labour Party was under this leadership of LeBlanc, Patrick, and then myself, we turned around and we brought school opportunities. When the St. Andrews High School was built in Londonderry, because of the hurricane that blew away the Wesley High School, and I was approached by Reverend John Gomes and Richley Gomes, was the first person in charge of that school. And I gave a free bus service to the Carib territory for the children to go to school. And for the first time, large numbers of indigenous children went to the St. Andrews High School. And today they are pilots, they are magistrates, they are, you name it, lawyers, they are doctors, And so that is the transformation I'm talking about. That is what, when you ask the question what independence, that's what we're talking about. And we realized under Britain, we were shortchanged because we couldn't go to the places like the international forums, like the United Nations and at the OAS, Organization of American States, and so forth, and other places. So we became involved with that. As soon as we became independent, shortly after Patrick was removed, I immediately was able to focus on all of that. We represented Dominica at the OAS. In fact, I have been with persons like Colin Booley and Dr. Nicholas Liverpool and Judith Pestiner, and there was someone else who were part of that delegation that went around meeting the Flora MacDonald of Canada. We couldn't have done that under the rule of Britain. We had now the liberty to go to those places. We were able to do an online conference, the NAM, when I was invited by Fidel at the United Nations in the end of the September term there, where Fidel was sitting next to me, and he knew of the fact that Dominica had its problems and offered to give us some assistance. And I sent Bernard Wilshire to Cuba to represent me and to negotiate. And we got the scholarships for the children of Dominica. And these are the first set of doctors that came from the Kalinago territory. Dr. Sanford came there, and a number of other doctors arrived on the scene going to the Cuban scholarship. We had engineers, Mackenzie and many others who came out, Julian Prevot and so on. These are people who came back and became the new middle class or if you want, upper class, if you wish to put it that way, and now change the whole atmosphere. They don't have to be from some special family to become someone. That's what the whole thing was all about. And so independence was to call an opportunity for us to go out there.
For the average Dominican.
For the average Dominican to find their way to become just
to have
like
access
you.
to opportunities. Yeah. So I have a few questions from the audience. Let's see if we can answer some of them.
Okay.
This one says, Considering the immense task of national rebuilding following Hurricane David, during your interim government, what was the single most challenging diplomatic barrier you faced when securing international aid? And what lessons from that period are most relevant to the modern disaster preparedness in the Caribbean? So,
A good, a good
hacking back,
question. Good,
a good
a
question
good
because,
question.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, a good question because what transpired really was that Cuba had offered us scholarships, and we could have had more. And I must say, especially on record, there was a good relationship with the United States through Sally Shelton, who was very supportive of my government. Um, and there was an offer from them that they would look into the possibility. They were very concerned. In fact, they were hostile to the idea, upset that I was thinking of accepting scholarships from Cuba, because
Mhm.
as far as they're concerned, this will just be a number of potential terrorists being trained,
Communist, right?
communists. That's what they thought
Yeah.
about it.
Mm.
And to be honest with you, I wasn't so sure what they were going to be taught insofar as ideological aspects were concerned. But I knew there was an opportunity that they would go to school where otherwise their family couldn't afford to send them, and government didn't have the resources to do that. So we accepted those scholarships. But the intention then was that the Americans would have given us an equal number of scholarships, but that was not to be. One of the other areas that we had negotiated through Bernard Wilshire was, and I must admit that there was the presence of Rosie Douglas, who came in with the delegation from Guyana, who wasn't aware that I was being invited because the non-aligned movement did represent a structure of countries that were non-aligned. That's basically what they were.
Right. Another
They were not
line. All those
subjected to
like during the Cold War, you either
That's
West
correct.
or you
That,
East,
that,
right?
that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
And so when Rusi came into that meeting, he thought he was just going to represent. And that was probably a little bit unusual and unexpected and unorthodox. They do not just go and represent a country that the country itself has been represented.
Mhm.
And so, I didn't accept Rusi's presence there at the time, although he was there, the delegation from Forbes Burnham. And so, what's his name? Bernard Wilshire was the official delegate of Dominica. And they were able to, I believe Rusi would have helped in that regard because he's Dominican, of course, a very forceful personality. And therefore, an offer was made for doctors to arrive in Dominica. So we signed a contract. That is Bernard Wilshire, who was my delegate as per my authority as Prime Minister, to accept Cuban doctors. The doctors were ready to come in to help after the hurricane, but somewhere along the line, the minister at the time was Charles Maynard. The thinking was that it is considered to be uncomfortable for him to have accepted doctors from Cuba at the time. In fact, when doctors from Dominica became doctors qualified, they were not accepted by the Freedom Party government. And so, we're talking about a lot of difficulties in that regard. The question as to how do you engage in certain relationships. For example, I remember having to visit Grenada by the invitation of Maurice Bishop, and the Prime Minister of St. Lucia was also invited. Afi Martin was brought along with me as a Minister of Agriculture, I think it was. And we had this very important meeting that's called the St. George's Declaration, and the more experienced persons who can dig into facts and fact finding, if they do the St. George's Declaration of 1979, I think it was a very important moment because we three governments agreed that there would be a One Caribbean. It's called the One Caribbean Conference. And that followed up from what Libla had done some years before that, what you had called the Little Eight, when he was trying to get a reconstruction of an integration movement. When we started this integration movement at St. George's, Grenada, and we haven't been given credit. Maurice Bishop was not, nor has Alan Louisi been given credit, nor have I been given credit. But as that was the beginning of the OECS, Ambassador, what do you call it, treaty that was signed. 1 year later, because that had begun with us, the free governments. And so that's what independence meant, that we could go out there and make decisions that have an effect upon the development process of the country.
That's awesome. Let me see what another question from the audience. Um, let's see this one. Your government is often referred to as the interim government after the constitutional crisis of 1979. What was the most critical decision you made to restore normal governance and legitimize your role, particularly after resigning from the previous administration and before forming the Democratic Labour Party? Do you understand the question?
Well, the question is a little upended because I responded to that earlier. I gave you
Earlier,
that
right?
information. Yeah.
Hmm.
And because the reason why the Democratic Labour Party was formed wasn't a party formed for party's sake. The Democratic Labour Party was formed merely as a demonstrative vehicle by which persons from the Patrick John Labour Party could then join in with me and give me the support in the parliament, which was in July of the year, just a month later, in order for it to give the semblance and the creation of a legitimate constitutional process. Of course, it's not perfect, but it was the best that could be done at the time. And so I emerged as the person parliamentarian in parliament that could get the majority of elected members to become the leader of the country or leader of parliament.
So,
But more than that, I just would say that I did get to dismiss, and I think Lennox Longichurch may have written that in one of his books, that I dismissed them in the day, in the morning, and they resign in the afternoon, or something of that sort, because Maynard and Brian Allen then resigned that day, you know.
mhm.
But what people don't know is that their resignation was brought about by another matter, which is to do with the fact that they did not want to accept the doctors from Cuba, that's one. And two, when the Ross University matter came up, they were objecting to it because the thinking was that this would be a kind of a half-baked kind of educational process for doctors. And if I remember very well, I may be getting a little older, but my memory is still intact. There was a letter that Charles Maynard referred to that must have come from, according to him, Dr. Grail, that said that the creation of a medical school is the bastardization of the medical profession. And
Wow.
so they fought me on this Cross University, and I got them dismissed on this basis. They said that they dismissed themselves. Whichever way, they were out of the cabinet, and a new government was formed.
Do you pave the way to be able to accept these activities?
Absolutely.
The Ross University, which turned out
Absolutely.
to be
Absolutely.
a major part of the economic fabric of the country until we lost it. Now,
Very
talking about the Democratic Labour Party, and fast forwarding because we are maybe I wanted to go until 90 minutes, so we're about 10 minutes away from that. Um, I current situation. Is the Democratic Labour Party still on the books? Is there a need to revive a Democratic Labour Party in the current?
very abusive. Anyway, let me just say this: that yeah, there is I think there was some subterfuge where certain people whose names I won't mention right now, maybe for another time, claimed the Labour Party, the Democratic Labour Party, and the shoe symbol, the hat symbol, and so that is something that requires a refresher in terms of the determination where is it right now.
Mhm.
But let me just give you another bit of history, which most people don't know, and historians seem not to know either, that in 1980 to 83, Patrick John and myself, as leaders of the two Labour parties, had engaged into a number of what you call dialogue on a one-on-one, and party to party, central committee to central committee, conference to conference, and at the end, we determined that we would have a joint convention of the both parties to merge them together and make one out of this so that we come back under the umbrella of the Dominican Labour Party. And that was done at Londonderry. And there was an election. I won. I became the leader. Patrick, although very popular, became the second, the what do you call it, the
Deputy leader.
deputy
Hmm.
leader of the Dominica Labour Party. And that went on until I think it was 85, when Mike Douglas and Ruzi and others, made certain moves which I wouldn't go into right now. And Patrick, at that point, was at a period of some need, and some support was given to them, and they emerged to manage the affairs of the Dominica Labour Party from 1985. I resigned. This is a matter that's on the public record in the newspapers of the Chronicle and all of that, because I did not like the way it was done. However, it is what it was. And so I came out of the Dominica Labour Party and have been very independent ever since.
So I mean, I don't want to force you, but you didn't say whether you think the country might be ready for a new version, a revival of the
Well, let me put it this
Democratic
way.
Labour Party.
I mean, it depends on who have the balls to do what they have to do. I cannot now. I
Mhm.
mean, where I am now, I'm in a very good place. I'm talking from a historical perspective, a senior statesperson.
An elder statesman by any measure.
I'm an elder statesman, really elder, really.
I shouldn't be any because you look like you're 45, so I shouldn't say
Yeah, well, thanks for
by
that,
any measure. But
I will I'll
definitely
give you my wife's phone number so you could tell her that as well.
based on your knowledge, your experience, your involvement, your elder.
Yeah,
But
so
I
am
guess
I. So I let the younger people who have to believe in themselves,
Mhm.
for me, what is sad, really, what is sad for me, really, if I have to be very honest, brutally frank, that is. In the years that I was involved in the politics, at 25 or even a little younger, actually, I used to go to all the political meetings with my father. And a lot of the meetings of politics was being held at my father's house. I heard all these people like Leblanc, everybody else, Patrick and LeBlanc and Ducre and Ronald Amo. All these people walked in and out of my father's house. And I heard them and I was very intrigued. I was very excited about what I was hearing. I heard about, and I knew about Mr. Boyd and Frank Barron and all of these people, Alvin Aman Trading, you know, persons who were elegant in their communications, Elkin Henry and so on. And so a lot of us young people, the Bernard Wilshires and the what's his name, Riviers and Afi Martin and so many others I could name, Rosie Douglas and Mike Douglas and so on. These are young people, who came forward and took their stand. And they probably went on for a couple more generations, but they were the young ones who started, people like Gabriel Christian and so on. But today, when you look at Dominica, which young person or young group of persons that you hear that is showing some interest in the political processes of Dominica? I don't hear it. Maybe I'm a little the same way I didn't hear about your radio station before. Maybe I'm not hearing what is happening on the ground in Dominica. But it seems to me that persons who went out there, got educated, came back as lawyers, as doctors, as engineers, as architects, and so on. What are they doing to set a foundation for the next generation? I don't know.
Because the reason I ask that is because I listened to you talk about what the Labour Party was about. Really the empowerment of the average Dominican. And when we look at current affairs in Dominica and we see that there are major projects going on, but there seem to be um, a lack of availability or the lack of utilization of local um, brain power and manpower and muscle power. The unfortunate thing is that we get devastated by a hurricane. The silver lining in that cloud is that you get to do a lot of construction, which can then be a boost to your economy. And we see a lot of that activities taking place by non-Dominicans. And when you juxtapose that to a government that says, hey, if you're not a Dominican, you cannot buy more than 1 acre unless it's a government sanctioned project. Um, we see the disparity. And so maybe there is a need to to readjust, I don't know, the radar or the rudder, the compass. The Labour Party seems like it needs an awakening as to where it's
I
going.
think I would go further than that. I would say the youth of Dominica need an awakening. I think the educated intelligentsia of Dominica needs a reawakening.
Awakening.
I
Okay.
think that Dominica um, per square mile and by per population numbers probably have the most educated, qualified persons in the diaspora than any other country in the world, maybe. Because our people are everywhere you spin and you look and you check, there's a Dominican emerging somewhere, somehow, in very eminent positions in various parts of the world. But where are they in terms of their direct involvement, in the process of the uh, reconstruction, construction, or development process? Let me just, I know we don't have much more time, but I get inspired when, persons like Bernard Wiltshire had this to say. He said that O.J.R. Perry, as many of us know him, definitely has an honorable place in our island's history because not only did he answer to the call to special service in the political crisis of '79, when he was able, through great charm and political acumen, to plot the country through that crisis and avoid what might otherwise have been fratricidal violence and mayhem,
Hmm.
but he was able to advance the long struggle for aspiration of the masses of the people to gain access to good land by distributing and redistributing some of the historical plantations on which their ancestors had been enslaved. Now, when I hear this, I say, okay, well, at least I did what was said by Isaiah, which says, I have cared for you since you were born. Yes, I carried you before you were born. I will be your God throughout your lifetime until your hair is white with age. I made you and I will care for you and I'll carry you along and save you. Now, I'm saying that to say all of this, that the world waits for the young men and young women of every country to come forward and stand up
Coming forward.
and come here forward, sons and daughters, right?
Right.
And so we need that now. So if I'm to say something now to you, I'd say the call is we are the youth. I don't know about blaming the government per se, because the government is a product of its people,
Hmm.
and there was a level of intolerance of Patrick. I did demonstrate that intolerance, being a young man, very young, just having had my first son, and I decided I was leaving because I wasn't prepared to accept. Man of principle. So where is the principle? Are we just saying things about what we don't like and just accepting it, and then blaming the process that is ongoing without us challenging it? And
Right.
then who's going to challenge it? The old men like me? Or would it be the young people who's now coming?
That is a profound. That is the profound question of the evening. Certainly. So, OJ, I want to give you an opportunity to speak a little bit about your involvement. I'm sure by now, well, you don't look like somebody who's retired, and some of us can never retire because our brain's always going active. In addition to your political involvement and activities, you also are known as a businessman, an entrepreneur, who have introduced many ideas, uh, and most of your ideas are not just for or one person doing a business. It's ideas that seem to, if they were given the support they needed, would have contributed tremendously to the economy and the whole employment in Dominica. You want to talk a little bit about your philosophy in terms of and your activities, if you choose to,
Well,
on the business front?
let me give you a little bit of leeway here. I will be prepared to come back on another program on the question about vision
Mm-hmm.
political activity versus the ability to create employment opportunities for those of us who may not have the vision that some of us have. What has obtained, why it failed, and what could happen. I think there are many, many people in Dominica who have tried projects, and for whatever reason, it didn't come to fruition through lack of support in one way or the other by the system that has been one that creates too many complexities in the process of establishing programs and projects. And
Proverbial
so,
red tape. Hmm?
yes, and so the large volume of work that has been my experience requires another opportunity to
I'm
talk to
going
you.
to embrace that offer, and definitely as we approach the new year 2026, I think would be an opportune time to talk about some of those activities and some of those ventures, because it may inspire some people to a young person to
I believe
start,
so because I
start.
think mentorship is a critical part of where we are. There are many of us who have gone, through the system and may be able to inspire others to avoid the mistakes that we made.
Awesome. So we are at 90 minutes plus 2 minutes. So I'm going to say that we are at the end of my time with you. I really appreciate your indulgence of me taking so much of your time. And the audience appreciated it. This is a wonderful conversation. I think we need to have more of those conversations because there's so much in your head. Some of it may be written down. We would like to know where they are written down so we could have access to them. But what's in your head? This is a good forum to talk about it and to give it some additional air. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to close off. On this, the occasion of the 47th anniversary of the Commonwealth of Dominica, you are most likely the most prominent elder statesman, in terms of your high position that you achieved, and the body of work that sits behind you. And so happy independence to you. But I'm going to give you the opportunity to say a few words to fellow Dominicans and friends who are on listening to the program.
Yes, let me just thank you for the level of communication that you have brought forth on this program. You're Dominican from Castle Bruce, and you're an engineer. Came from a family of farmers, I would imagine, and there are many like you coming out of the various parts of our country, Dominica, and who have attained higher heights of performance and have contributed to other countries and other systems and other establishments. Question is, how do we welcome you back home? We are into a new era where communication does not require a plane ride. Communication could very well be that wherever you are, in the kitchen, in the bathroom, even, that you could communicate and release that which you have to establish an opportunity for someone in your homeland, Dominica, that would make it a useful thing for their development to understand that there are certain aspects of their life journey that requires support from a brother or sister who have that experience, who have that knowledge. So I'm saying that mentorship is critical. Even as we speak, I am about to embark on a visit back to Dominica sometime with my wife, and we're going to try and make a contribution in what way we can to a certain aspect of certain people's lives in Dominica. But in doing so, we're doing so with the joy of knowing that we are children of the Most High, that God is in control of our destiny, and that if we are able to recognize that we are here for a moment, not for ourselves, but to contribute to others. It's saying that that which you share will multiply. There's a saying that says as such, that I shall pass this way but once. Whatever good I may do, let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. And even today, as I heard my good friend Vincent Robinson, who I spoke to a few weeks ago, trying to find out from him his body of work about international airports, from Libla to 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 Eugenia, to Oliver Seraphin, Patrick John, and 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 Edison James. What were the efforts and what stopped the international airport from being constructed? I had a long conversation with him, and maybe at the next time we speak, I'll give you some of the feedback I got from this man who died yesterday, I believe, or this morning, Vincent Robinson. May he rest in peace.
Condolences to his family.
Amen. So thank you very much for bringing me to your forum. I'm looking forward to talking to you someday in the future.
The honor and the pleasure is mine, Mr. Seraphin. Thank you so much. I love the way that you are very open and candid with your information. And so I thank you for coming on the program. From the comments in the audience, it's obvious that they too uh, enjoyed the conversation and they are already looking forward to the next conversation. So definitely we'll be in touch. Like I said, we will bring you back probably, you know, either just after the new year, so that because I always like to have conversations about not necessarily New Year's resolution, but plans. Because I mean, the start of the year, calendar year, is a good time to take stock and to make plans, and so we can talk about those kind of things. So appreciate your time and all the best to you and your family. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so listeners, there you have it. I want to say a really very, very, very special thank you to those in the audience. You guys were so participative and made great contributions. You know, Glenda, Sharon, Ambrose, Blanc, Judith Francis, the Easter TD Joseph, Alvin Thomas, of course. And Alvin, thank you so much for putting me in touch with OJ and helping me to set up this wonderful conversation. Thank you for that. Anis Spice John is on there, and a number of you who did not comment, so therefore I don't see that you are on. I hope that you uh, enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, but most importantly, that you take away from it the hopes and the aspirations and the dreams of a people that we need to keep alive. And as OJ advised us, it's a time for young people to step forward and to say, you know what, I can contribute. I have a contribution I can make. I have the training. I have the experience. I have the desire to be a servant leader, not a big boat kind of prime minister, president kind of thing. You will get the respect from the people naturally, but to be a servant leader of the people, to really move Dominica back towards the great Eden that it should be, that it was made out to be. Let's embrace that on the 47th anniversary of our independence. Let us make a commitment that by the time our country turns to be 50 years old, that we are going to actively get involved in one way or the other, even if it's just to give an encouraging word to someone who is willing to make a contribution. A few programming notes. Let me just say that the Youth Effect is a program that is hosted by Miss Kathy Robinson. It returns on Monday the 10th is Monday coming, and it's a program on this week on TDN Radio, TDN Media. It's from 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Wonderful program where she brings young people on and they talk about what young people talk about, technology and relationships and everything young. And also our flagship weekend program, Dissect, returns on Saturday, November 15th at 7 p.m. with your favorite host, Novelist, and the gang. Those are programs that you have where they not only they bring you the music, they bring you in interviews with the top artists to understand what they decide to meet the artists and to get to know them more intimately, which would just absolutely uh, help just change the way that you absorb um, a song when you know the artist. All right, so folks, there you have it. It's speaking all of the time, Mr. OJ Seraphin, definitely, or Clayton Flora. Thank you so much for reminding me. On Sunday we have the melting pot on Sundays on TDN Radio as well, with Clayton Flora. And Clayton also is on a Tuesday night as well. He's on a Tuesday night. So definitely, TDN Radio has great, great, great programming, and you should tune in. Like like us on Facebook or wherever you're listening. Hit the notification bell so you can get notified when our great programs are coming around. And so, folks, till next week Wednesday. It's good night to you and have a wonderful remainder of the week. Thank you so much for being here and for contributing so much. Good night, everyone.